use of language, and I don't think people are very clear as to why we have to be so aggressive with that. And also one other thing, I hope that during that forum, you guys will address why we are being so aggressive on a 20 to 50 year, potential sea rise, why we are being so aggressive, what is the purpose behind the aggressiveness given and the time frame. One other point I want to make is I hope the council fully understands that there are East Corte Madera is made up of dual income families that have been affected by COVID like everybody else has. I myself, we have 2 high pressure jobs. I have 3 kids at home, a young baby. I'm homeschooling. This thing has been going on for about 18 months now, and I'm just finding out about it. I think the council needs to be aware that there are people that are unemployed. We're in a recession, and to do things that could possibly immediately affect the saleability of our properties, I also feel is very irresponsible. And I would like to, have that addressed, if not before the meeting, during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, we will move on. And I see next up is Marta.
Oh, there's another hand raised. Okay, let me take care of that. Okay.
Yeah. Marta, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. I want to echo what my neighbor said. We have huge concerns with both the levy section and the retreat section of the cap. We found out recently about this as well, and most of our neighbors found out because we found out. The plan includes measures that we now have evidence will hugely affect negatively the property values of our home and those of our neighbors. Some neighbors had their homes recently evaluated and by local realtors, and the realtors found that if the cap is adopted in its current form, the value of the homes will decrease by 12% to 20% immediately upon adoption. So for a home like mine, that I've just added to, that is worth about $2 million, that potentially is a $400,000 cost just for me of your levy. And there are many of us that live on the water, and there are many of us that live in Mariner Cove and Marina Village. And the potential for depreciation in our neighborhoods, if you adopt the cap with the levy measure and the retreat measure, is enormous. And we don't think it's fair for the town council to pass that cost on to us. If this is a public project and you wish to go ahead with it, despite the fact that most of the residents of the neighborhood do not want to go ahead with it, you cannot put hundreds of thousands of costs on each of us. So we hope that with the huge amount of negative feedback that you have gathered, you will find that your role is not that of independent decision makers, but is that of representative of the needs and the wishes of the neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you, Marta. I will open again for public comment as I see no one else has their hand raised. Last call. Would anyone else like to speak from the public? Okay. Mark?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I would, I appreciate the comments of our few neighbors who just spoke. I agree with them wholeheartedly. The backdrop of a global pandemic need not be understated. I've seen it commented a few times that this has been an effort for 18 months, and that seems to be important to the town council. There are other distractions. I have only just seen this listed recently, so I too am coming to this discussion late. I would like to see section 3 of the CAT removed in its entirety, top to bottom, every single letter, every single comment, the entire thing needs to be reworked. The town council was elected as representatives to represent us, and in regards to an us versus them comment made by the vice mayor with a petition of 550 people representing 600 homes, agreeing that this thing needs to be, section 3 needs to be removed in its entirety. As elected officials representing us, it would be irresponsible to do anything other than hear the people who voted for each council member to remove section 3 in its entirety. There is no challenge to the concept of global warming. I don't think 18 months is sufficient time without the input of the neighborhood to solve a global problem like global warming during a pandemic. It's not to say that it's not important. It's not important today, this month, this year, certainly not by April. And it's something that we can and will address. I don't think now is the appropriate time, especially during a pandemic with everyone's economic livelihood at stake, to then go and remove or lower or limit people's home value, that sense of security. The pandemic is challenging people's sense of security, and the council has done an egregious act of making people insecure about the one thing that they do have, which is their home. So we have a global disease, and now we have a town council that seems to want to rail against this community. I find that irresponsible, and the responsible thing to do would be to remove it, section 3, in its entirety, to be revisited later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Again, Christopher? Christopher, are you there?
Oh, excuse me. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, I live in Mariners Cove, and I found out about this cap about 2 weeks ago. The notification by the town is pathetic and non-existent. We should have all gotten mailers about this a year and a half ago. I've been here for 3 years. Haven't received much from you guys. I get an occasional email from the mayor, but this should have been notified by mail, not relying upon internet mail. It should be by mail because it greatly affects all of the neighbors. I'm in agreement pretty much with what the other neighbors say, eliminating the Cat 3 until it's reworded. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Would anyone else like to comment from the public? Rebecca?
Seeing no other raised hands, I just checked our public comment at tcmmail.org email address, and there was one email for the Climate Action Committee from David Bell. And I'll start my timer. And it says, to the Climate Action Committee, the committee should evaluate provisions of the Climate Action Plan that adversely current and future impact property values and recommend to the town council the removal or revision of such language. In general, managed retreat shall be admitted from the CAP, or minimally clearly stated retreat is a measure of last resort and only considered if property is unsafe, etc. Specifically, the following language adversely affects property value. homeowner rights, and community resilience. Quote, restrict significant redevelopment or improvement of existing properties in highly vulnerable areas, unquote. This statement has obvious flaws and seems to allow the town to deny permits with subjective evaluation. And then quote, form a regional strategic retreat advisory board to investigate the potential and feasibility of managed retreat within Marin County and the surrounding region, end quote. As stated above, remove managed retreat as an option. Thank you, David Bell.
Thank you, Rebecca. Then seeing as there's no more public comments, we will move on to our next agenda item. Thank you to members of the public for sharing your voice and for everything you had to say. All right, now we will move on to section 3, general business. Or no, section 3, can we move around and just do our update from town council liaisons to the climate action committee so that
yes, you just need confirmation from the rest of the committee that they are in agreement that you can reorder the agenda. But also I did just want to tell the attendees on the call that on every second and fourth Tuesday at 4 p.m. the town hosts a community chat with the mayor and town manager, and I encourage you to join that chat next Tuesday and share your concerns with the mayor and town manager, and town staff and department heads are usually on that Zoom as well. You have confirmation to move the agenda around.
Right. So then I will welcome Mayor Beckman and Vice Mayor Kuhnhart to speak about any updates from the town.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'll just start, if I may, because I'm going to have to go in a few minutes, and I'll turn it over to David. I'm really appreciative of the residents who joined us and spoke, because the main thing that I had to report out on is the feedback we've been getting from the community with regards to the climate adaptation plan, and then the upcoming opportunities for continued public involvement, participation, and shaping that plan. So the residents, I think, that spoke today really kind of encapsulated the main feedback that we've been hearing in the last few weeks from residents, specifically in Mariner Cove, which is where I live, and Marina Village, which is the next neighborhood over, both right on the bay. Residents' concerns that I've been made aware of with regards to the cap, as we've heard today, generally focus on issues of dealing with sea level rise, how we might respond, and people are specifically concerned about flood barriers, potential restrictions on redevelopment, and language on a potential retreat in the future. So I think, first, I think we can all agree that residents' concerns certainly make sense. As residents pointed out, for all of us, our homes are generally the one thing of value that we have, and are a lot of times all or most of our net worth. So that's everybody's critical asset, and we approach the issue with that very much in mind. I wanted to just say that, I think what is being made clear to us is that there's clearly more discussion that needs to be had. Rebecca, thank you for bringing up the Tuesday chats. Just wanted to make sure for everybody on the line. Look, so one of the first things that I did when I became mayor was I asked for us to do this, basically launch a broad communications overhaul and try and revamp how we communicate with the public, because it was clear that information that we put out was not really getting through to folks in as effective a way as we wanted. So we hired a consultant. We did this whole kind of communications revamp. And I think what we're seeing now with this climate adaptation plan is that we're still having some sort of disconnect. It sounds from the comments that we heard here like maybe the direct mailer that we did recently was the most effective in reaching out. But this has been an 18-month ongoing public process. There've been, I think, 4 public workshops, a survey, a couple public hearings, things like that all over the last 18 months. At least one of these events was in our neighborhood at Cove School. Other residents were able to find out about these and attended. The town publicized these every way we can. That's, town website, Facebook, Nextdoor, the marquee outside the rec center. Basically every communications channel that the town has, and especially now with the inclusion of direct mailer, we have used to try and get the word out. So one thing that I would ask the residents on the line, in addition to sharing all your feedback on the cap, is please let us know if you have ideas for how we could better communicate with you, and how could we have made you aware of this 18 months ago when it was starting. And I would also just ask, anybody on the line who isn't already, please subscribe to the town's newsletter, because that really is the best way to just keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on at town hall. You can glance right through. Rebecca puts a fantastic little table of contents at the beginning, so you can just glance through the bullet points and see if anything in there, piques your interest, and then you can click the link and dive in and learn a little more. So those are kind of my asks with regards to communication. And then on the specific points of the cap that have been raised, again, I think, very valid points raised, certainly understandable, why these concerns would arise. I think the next best kind of opportunity for public engagement for all of you guys to really help shape this draft of the cap is on February 3rd. We're having a public workshop. It's going to be on Zoom at 4:30. The link is on the town website. But that's kind of our next, big public workshop specifically tailored towards flooding issues. There's going to be another workshop the day after that, February 4th at 7 for wildfire issues specifically. And then at some point in March, the entire draft is going to come back before the town council and have another public hearing, which is the meeting where it'll be up for potential adoption. And so there's going to be, at that meeting, another chance for more public comment. And the council may or may not give direction to staff to further tweak this draft based on the feedback. So those are kind of the main updates that I wanted to give the committee, just with regards to what we've been hearing from residents, as was just exemplified by the residents who kindly took the time to speak to us right now. The one thing that I really wanted to acknowledge was a specific point made by David Bell. Retreat is a big, scary, it's drastic, right? I think we all get that. It's literally the most drastic response that we could take when it comes to climate change issues and adaptation. And so I think, he sees on something very true when he said, retreat is an absolute last resort. And I think if we haven't done a good enough job of spelling that out in the cap, then I think we can definitely do that. Nobody wants to walk away from any of our homes in Corte Madera unless we absolutely have to, unless there's no real workable way to salvage our property, because we realize again that, these are homes, these are families' homes, this is everything to people. And so it's certainly not something that we're ready to just walk away from if there's any practical way that we can save them. So I think excellent point, David, point well taken. Thank you for bringing that up. The other thing I just wanted to touch on, and then I'll turn it over to David Kuhnhart, I guess I'm gonna be late for my next meeting, is with the concerns about property value, again, totally understand. And I would just love for us, if we wanna take a step back and all as a community dive back into how we arrived at the current draft where we're talking about flood barriers and things like that, we can totally do that at our upcoming flood workshop. And I think that's totally valid. But the one thing that I just really wanna keep in perspective for folks is that when we're talking about property values, the worst thing that we could do for property values in our neighborhoods is to do nothing, right? Because if the market sees that this is a neighborhood totally vulnerable to flooding, we're already getting horrible flooding along Golden Hind when we get king tides, especially if they coincide with rainstorms. As soon as the market starts to price in that this is a neighborhood that's prone to flooding and there's no plan to do anything about it, that is the worst possible scenario for our property values. And so I totally understand, where the concerns about, homes that have views and access to the bay right now, the potential for losing that access and the potential impact that might have on property value, absolutely get where folks are coming from on that. But I just think that as we problem solve that and get to kind of the best possible response we can and the best plan for the coming decades that we can, let's just please try and keep in mind the bigger picture that, we could lose it all if we do nothing. Doing nothing is just not an option, because that is, that wipes our neighborhood off the map within 50 years, I would imagine. So that's kind of the one thing I wanted to say with regards to flood barrier issues and property values, because I think these are very valid points that folks are bringing up, and I'm looking forward to diving more into them at the upcoming flooding workshop on February 3rd, again at 4:30. With that, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave you guys. I've got another meeting I got to go to. David, I'm going to turn it over to you. Last thing I want to say is that David and I have both been responding to issues and feedback from residents as we've been made aware of them. Other council members, I assume, have been as well. Because of the Brown Act, none of the council members are allowed to coordinate our responses or anything like that. So, I respond to emails that I'm made aware of and emails that are sent to me and things like that. David responds to anything that he sees. I know David's on Nextdoor, I'm not on Nextdoor. So we're all kind of out in the community. We're not allowed to communicate, but we are, we're responding to you guys as best we can, as diligently as we can. And we look forward to engaging with you on February 3rd. And with that, I'm gonna have to bow out, everybody. Thank you so much. And I will see you guys soon.
Well said. Madam Chair, if I just take a couple of minutes. First of all, can you hear me all right? Please make it feel as though I'm not audible. It was a very good thing that the IJ put out an article on, let's say, the challenges of the climate adaptation planning effort. But unfortunately, they did a disservice by confusing the name with this committee. They called that climate adaptation plan the climate action plan, because around the county and around the state, in fact, CAPs referring to climate often mean climate action plans, right? And they're a variety of different things. In Corte Madera, we've divided into two separate activities. The one that most of the conversation in the last half an hour has been devoted to is the climate adaptation plan, defensive work, and both the hillsides and the shore. And the climate action plan, which is, let's say, more aggressively approaching the causes of climate change and the causes of sea level rise and global warming. And all of the members of this committee, except for Eli and I, and Rebecca, are pure volunteers who've come to the doors of this climate action committee in order to try to address the root cause and the burning of fossil fuels, right? Everybody put up your hand if you agree that that is the root thing that brought us all together in here in this committee, is to face and try to come up with strategies to reduce our production of greenhouse gases. And so there is an understandable, because of the confusion created by the IJ, there's an understandable confusion of the two completely separate activities. And soon shortly we're going to turn to what this group is doing. But I just wanted to mention two other things that are sort of happening in the county and happening around the Bay Area region that I would direct folks' attention to. One is, the most important one perhaps is the most distant one, which is the Bay Adapt program, which is a regional program of all jurisdictions and 9 counties around the San Francisco Bay that are endeavoring to come to terms with how do we address sea level rise, and how do we do that in an equitable way? How do we do that without sacrificing jobs, without sacrificing employment? How do we do that in a way to, in fact, create some new employment in some places as we protect shores, protect the environment, and protect one another. So the bayadapt.org is stepping up their activities, and they're sending a representative to the collected group of Marin County Council members and mayors at the end of this month to talk further about what their region-wide program is on sea level rise. More locally is the sea level rise program in the county of Marin, which has been active for about 7 years or so, called Bay Wave and Sea Smart. Bay Wave is on the bay side and Sea Smart on the ocean side. County has several employees who are working this issue all the time, and would like the public to be aware that the civil grand jury came forward in September and published a report that's essentially said, okay, out there in Marin, you're doing it, you're talking the talk, but you're not really walking the walk of adequate coordination on actions on sea level rise. Corte Madera, for example, is out in front taking more actions than some of the other communities, whereas and by actions, I mean planning actions, consideration, and working on options than other communities. Even our neighbor Larkspur is not so active as we are. So we are charged with, by that civil grand jury, doing more in alignment with every other community around the Bay. And every other community within, particularly within in Marin. So there are, and you can see anything about that effort if you just say, look at County of Marin and Bay Wave, and you can find a whole lot of material that's been produced over several years. And the state is the one, not the town council. We didn't invent this. The state published a report 5 years ago that said, yes, acceleration of sea level rise is underway because of global warming, and it's between 1 and 2 inches a year. That's 10 to 20 inches every decade. That's 2.5 to 5 feet over the course of the next 30 years, right? So if that's the jarring expert word, then how are we responsible? Jason asked us to be more responsible, and I absolutely agree with him on that. We have to be as responsible as possible. And how do we be responsible? By this committee trying to address the causes, and by the adaptation committee trying to address the responses and trying to come to terms with what those short, medium, and long-term steps might be in sections 1, 2, and 3 of the adaptation report. Now, does anybody else in this action committee have anything to say on this topic? I know, David Johnson, you were on the Planning Commission for a while, and I don't know whether you were ever on the Flood Committee, but if anybody else has anything to say on this, we could do that. Otherwise, let's get back to the agenda of the Climate Action Committee and mitigation, Madam Chair. Thank you.
David, I have a sort of a idiotically simple suggestion is, since the adaptation group has been much more in the public than we, that maybe we could, it's not too late to change our committee to something that's less confusing in the public eye. Instead of almost the same acronym, CAC versus CAP. So
Right.
I'm just putting it out there. I didn't realize, but now I do, that, hey, we want you to take all the heat for the adaptation. No, I'm just kidding, but let's keep in mind that there is this confusion, and the IJ apparently picked up on it.
And didn't correct it.
Thank you, Michael. Would Vice Mayor Hart, did you have something to say?
I just wanted to return to the agenda of this Climate Action Committee on, and maybe if Michael's right, we should be calling it mitigation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, then with that, we will move on to item 3A, the review of the recommended climate action plan actions by each subcommittee. So as far as this goes, I see a lot of the actions that our subcommittees have created as kind of two forms or two routes. One is, grassroots activism, action, things that we as volunteers can all do without the help of council or without direct influence of council, and then other actions as actions that need to be forwarded to council that need more collaboration and direct work that we as a committee cannot necessarily say this is going to happen. So I'd like to hear from each subcommittee or the subcommittees that have put forward actions and have already thought of what they want to share tonight. And then maybe if people are interested, we can kind of sort them into these two realms of action and see what would be required from each action as far as going forward, and then identifying a person who may want to head start that or may want to take charge on that. Would anyone else like to add to that before we start a subcommittee discussion?
I'll chime in.
Yeah, go for
I'll
it.
chime in. Thank you for setting the stage for that. I think the two buckets of the grassroots activism around awareness and education that we can build as a volunteer committee. So just the distinction between the two. And then the other, as I think about town council approval workshops, all the processes that we would need to go through for some of those larger actions that require bigger approval. So just adding a couple pieces there.
Yes,
Thank you.
All right, then with that, let's start with the Energy Committee because that's what I see first. And if a representative from that subcommittee could go ahead and chime in.
So that I'll jump in. That's our subcommittee. But we actually, the meeting before last, we reviewed our actions. I'm happy to go through them again, but we talked we talked through those already. Should we maybe move to another
Yes.
subcommittee?
Let's go ahead and move on, and then we can go back to energy.
Actually, if you could just very quickly summarize where you're from, that would give especially the dozen people who are still listening from the public an idea of what it is that we're talking about, and also give a chance for anybody else who's not actively worked on energy to comment, if that's okay.
Yep.
Sure. So I'm happy to. So there were 3 actions that our subcommittee identified that were part of the climate action plan. The first one it's cap 1-4 and 1-5, which is promoting existing residential and commercial rebate and incentive programs through MCE and PG&E. So the idea here would be, how can we leverage incentive programs to drive electrification in the home, and also promote adoption of MCE Deep Green in partnership, obviously, with the town and MCE. So that is number 1.
Amy,
Number
would it
2.
be helpful if I shared your Google Doc, or is that what you're reading off of right now?
Yeah, I'm just reading the green bars, so we certainly could run through that. It's also in the master list that you attached. So if everybody looks in the email with the agenda, you will see. Let's see.
Because I can share, I've got your spreadsheet open and I can share that screen if that's easier.
Yeah, either way, we can do that if you'd like. And then we'll just scroll to the green bars.
I don't see it attached
Thank
to the
you.
agenda.
We'll just.
They're yellow.
Okay. Are you seeing the spreadsheet? Or are you seeing
Yep.
my desktop?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Rebecca, and for presenting. So that first action that I just identified is more about community-based and driving education and awareness. The second action is cap 1-9, which is all about the town in terms of the municipal action. And so this is about replacing all street lights, traffic signals, and park lights with LEDs. And I think there's already movement here. And Martin, you might want to jump in and refresh my memory on what's happening here. But that's already moving forward. So that was just sort of as we think about balancing the various actions, those that are, this was sort of an easier slam dunk. And then the other ones are ones that we have to put more effort behind. The third action, which is not part of the action plan currently, is about how we think about disallowing new gas hookups for both residential and the town. And so that is something that as a committee, we discussed 2 meetings ago in terms of rewording the language around how we were positioning that. And obviously we need a lot more conversation about what this means as we take this to council and the community. So I'll pause there and just answer any questions.
And can I just add that the town of San Anselmo and the town of Fairfax are both considering moving ahead on an elimination of gas hookups for any new construction or major renovation projects. They're not there yet. They haven't done it yet, but they are moving forward. And already, obviously, Berkeley and Santa Rosa and Windsor and a few other jurisdictions have moved on doing that. So we're not alone, and we're not front of the line on taking that action. Already there's been some legal pushback by a couple of developers, but and some restaurateurs until restaurateurs were accommodated in Berkeley and San Francisco. But there is motion, and we're not alone, and I think it's going to be an early topic in the spring with our town council.
Great. And there is momentum there.
Let me just add that, reiterate without taking a lot of time, my concern is the devil is in the details. We don't want to burden homeowners who are doing any level of renovation with revising their source of heat for the house, or you know, it's so I'm extremely, as an architect who works on residential renovations, I'm very interested in how the requirement is defined and if it's strictly new construction. If it gets into the area of renovation, it's problematic.
And the way we have, and I think that's a, go ahead, Martin, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that this is pointing out exactly where we are in our planning on this subcommittee for the objectives of promoting residential rebates and electrifying appliances, and the one to promote deep green. Those are community actions that we can take. We need to coordinate those with MCE and with the town for promotion, for developing promotion plans and next steps and who we should be contacting and that sort of thing. And also with improving energy efficiency, the town is basically moving ahead with those as planned. The whole eliminating gas hookups in the future, that's a much more long-range process that requires hearings and other things that we're just learning about. But so our point now is we want to be able to move ahead with the easier parts of this that we can implement as a, you know, with minimal input from the town to promote MCE deep green and the awareness of residential rebate programs that we should be taking advantage of while they're still available from a time and funding standpoint. That's what I wanted to say about where we're going in the energy group, right, Amy?
Yeah, thank you for that, Martin. And I think that summarizes it well. And Michael, just back to your point, the way we have this worded on the gas hookups or the gas lines is about new hookups. But again, per all the community comments we heard at the start of this meeting, that is a longer road and one that involves a lot of community discussion and working with the team. So it's the very beginning in terms of proposing it. So I just wanted to put that out there. But I think by reviewing this and hearing from what Martin said around the community, the idea would be that as the other subcommittees share their actions, we can join effort in building awareness and education with the community and do that in a collaborated, cohesive way across a lot of the different channels that Eli had mentioned in some of his remarks. And then for the bigger topics that we need to take through City Council that will take planning and workshopping, we can align our efforts on that as well. So that's what we have from the Energy Subcommittee. And I think, as I said, as we move forward and hear from the other subcommittees, coordinating our efforts will allow us to drive action on these items.
Thank you, Amy. And I also want to point out something that you mentioned to me earlier on having this idea of maybe, you know, as in terms of outreach and in terms of these actions that we want to, you know, pursue as like volunteer efforts, maybe having a potential idea of like 5 actions that we just blast out to the community that are 5 simple things every Corte Madera resident can do to help the environment and to help reduce carbon emissions. So aligning some of these actions from different subcommittees, you know, maybe that's promoting residential rebates and incentive programs and something else that the transportation program puts out, and we come up with a list of 5 and then being able to really push that out as an educational and awareness thing, because I think that's something very action-based that we as a committee can take. So just putting that out there, and wanted to thank Amy for that idea. I think with that, let's move to the Transportation Committee and hear what they have to say. And I didn't mention this earlier, but if a subcommittee has not came up with 3 actions, that's okay. But I think in terms of this meeting and in just going forward, let's focus on the groups that have put forward those actions and evaluating the actions that have been put forward. So with that, is there anyone from the Transportation Committee? I know I'm on that group, but I have not received any correspondence there. Okay.
Rebecca, can you dial up the list a little bit and then make it bigger so that we can see the transportation? Yeah, I think
to zoom in, is that what you're saying?
Yes, please. Yeah.
I think that's about as big as I can go.
Yeah.
I think sorry, David, go ahead.
No, you.
We did have a chairman of this who was trying to organize it, and I forget who that person.
It was Ann Doherty.
Ann Doherty.
And is she still with us?
Not today.
No, Ann Doherty actually had to leave the committee due to time constraints. And
okay, so we're a little rudderless here. I can pick up the chairmanship. We haven't discussed it unless somebody else wants to.
Yes,
anyways,
she just let me know that today, so that was new information.
Okay,
and
that's news.
What I would like to do is suggest is this second thing that's listed, a scheduled meeting between us and the Drive Clean Bay Area group. I'm very close and familiar with the group, and they would love to talk at any time. And they're moving on a few different initiatives, which are actually biting into success. One of them is education, and they're doing multilingual education in a variety of schools around the Bay Area, and they've been asked to do that beyond on fundamentals of keeping transportation clean. And they have also done a buyer's assistance program for 1 month. They put it out there in November and December, and they had about 300 statements of interest, and about 100 people move forward on the acquisition of electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids with the assistance of Cartelligent, who is pulling together special rebates and some incentives and good pricing. They're going to try to re-up that with even a different group of vehicles coming forward, but they're full of creative ideas. They're also moving on stimulating the implementation of and construction of electric vehicle charging stations in a number of places. And there's some progress on that within Corte Madera. The town has put in one EV charging stub that can serve 2 vehicles right in between town hall and the fire department, and is permitting multiple installs for the town center and a village mall. So if this group as a whole would like to meet, I think that would be perfectly good size with the representative of the of Drive Clean Bay Area. I can make that happen in our next meeting if you like. And
I would definitely like to hear what they're working on. Yes.
Madam Chair, what do you think?
Yep, definitely. Do you think it would be most effective to have that group come on to our monthly meetings as a committee, or joining a subcommittee group with just transportation people?
Well, I think it's big enough. And first of all, it is the biggest single contributor to greenhouse gases in our county, right? Because we don't have any industries cooking away. So transportation is the biggest single contributor. So I would think it would be of interest, and tell me if I'm wrong, members of the committee, but I think it would be of interest to everybody to hear from them. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm seeing nods. Okay. And so all I need is the date, and I will make sure that that comes together.
Right. Great. in terms of that, I think they could provide us with some clear routes of action and
Yes.
how to go from there. So we
Yeah.
can wait to put forward those transportation actions till our next meeting or till we hear from them.
Mhm.
If that's good with everyone, then we can move on to our next subcommittee.
Can,
Which-
Sarah, excuse me just for a moment.
No, go ahead.
I just want to put out that in terms of the spreadsheet items, I don't have any objection. Something that I'd like people to at least think about, and David, you may want to comment, is does this committee want to get more specific in terms of lobbying for certain transportation solutions as it affects Corte Madera? And that'll be, things like the tunnel, things like the southern crossing. I could explain what that is. Or even more broadly, would this group, I don't know where, one of the biggest things we can do is to advance workforce housing. I mean, that has a greater impact on our carbon footprint than almost anything else. And if we want to take a stand on these things that are a little broader than specific pedestrian path stuff, if we want to, and some of these things are political, I realize, but they have tremendous impact, like the Alto Tunnel, for example. So I'm just putting it out there, whether that's anathema to this committee to promote particular solutions, because everything is a general encouragement at this point. So, again, it's sort of what is the thrust of this committee? Are we, to what extent are we just endorsing, or are we really an advocacy group? Hearing thunderous silence.
What I would say is that whatever we think we want to do, nothing is going to happen with a committee that doesn't have a head. And as you can see from the comments there in column A, I remember I attended the first meeting of this group, and we, as you can see, we just really didn't know how to get anything done. We were asking Rebecca to do all these things because, if you want to get something done, you ask a busy person. But I don't even know if Rebecca was even asked these questions about, whether these things happen and what we should do. So I think from an organizational standpoint, we need to have a better idea of who this committee is, unless it's just going to be subsumed into the entire climate action committee at this point. That seems to be the way we're talking about it now.
Well,
I'm not sure I completely followed the thrust, Martin, of what you said.
I'm thinking, how's this going to be implemented, and what are we going to do to refine what we're talking about? I mean,
well, yes, okay.
Someone's got to spend time on it, get consensus, and then do what's happened in the energy committee of putting together, deciding what we want to do, and then moving ahead with how to get them done. Without that, I don't know how it's going to happen. I mean,
Well,
no one here is against implementing a bicycle master plan, but that's not going to make it happen.
Right. Michael, I'll help you. And I'll start by making a couple of comments on things that are on this list already. First of all, the council did pass an ordinance to implement Assembly Bill 1236, which all communities in California were required to do some years ago, but most didn't. But almost all in Marin have now adopted that, and that is essentially making EV charging permitting simpler and have it an online process. And so that has been done and accomplished. Check. And we do need, I think, to help encourage private owners of big public spaces like our malls, various or our smaller shopping areas, to find good ways to put in EV charging so that it becomes ubiquitous, it becomes easy, and becomes visible, and becomes the go-to way to get powered up. And let's see. I guess
I have no argument with that. I guess I'm talking about something broader that I think touches on what Martin said. Is, you know, to what extent are these going to be specific projects, and how to what strength are they taken to the council and commission for implementation? I don't think that we can answer that right now. Again, I will take on, since apparently the chairman here resigned, I will take on being the chairman of this committee.
And I'll help you. I'll help you.
Unless David, sure, I would appreciate that.
I'll help you.
Since you have more connections to like the traffic group, et cetera, et cetera.
Michael and David, I did respond to Anne, I believe, months ago. The town's bicycle master plan is actually the bicycle and pedestrian plan, and a link to that 2016 plan is available on the town's website under the page for the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So any changes to that or updates to that would work through the BPAC committee. So that was where that plan originated.
And as well, any plans about the Alto Tunnel reopening would be first in the Bike Ped committee.
Well, just as an example, have they taken a position? Does anybody know? Or is that a little too fraught?
$60 million is a little bit too fraught. Yeah, it's not a plan yet.
Yeah. Okay. All right, David, we'll work on this.
Okay.
And going off of that, I also think that this is where these actions, kind of sorting them into these two buckets or these two ideas, because I think the best way that we're going to make these things happen and that we're going to organize if we know exactly what we're asking and what we're looking for. And I think that when looking at these actions, if we have this understanding that these need to be workshopped, these need to be taken to a next level, and then the actions that maybe us can volunteer, or specific people who may have, more time on their hands or more reason to get involved can go ahead and pick those up. But just contributing to that conversation, wanting to draw back a little bit to where we are today. I'll let David Johnson go before we move on.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Michael, thank you very much for taking this on. One thing in the Energy Committee, or one parsing that we did in the Energy Committee, was to suggest measures that the town of Corte Madera could take itself. And I didn't really see that evidenced very well in this list. I'd suggest that the town of Corte Madera could rapidly retire vehicles that require fossil fuel, if they haven't already, and go to electric vehicles, and dispense with the purchase of fossil fuels for operations for the town, which I think would be one good measure. And
Town
then
just bought 3 electric vehicles and decommissioned one remaining inspection vehicle that was surplused. So we're definitely starting to do that, and I believe that the only cars remaining are the trucks that the maintenance workers use, and I don't know what the plans are yet for conversion to electric vehicles for those purposes.
That's great. Thank you very much. So obviously I don't have
and an electric bicycle too. We got a grant for which we were able to purchase an electric bicycle for our permit techs to ride to properties inspections.
That's great. So leading by example is really good. Michael, I would still encourage you to push on that, and where we can push on alternatives for vehicular transportation. It should be the center point of the work that you do. Thank you for doing all you do, Michael.
Okay.
And there's one other sort of good news thing that's occurring. It's not exactly a town action, but except to the extent that we are giving permission to it to happen. As everybody knows, one of the disastrous aspects of COVID is that retail stores have been extremely stressed, and restaurants have been extremely stressed. So there are vacancies in our town village mall, which is obviously privately owned. First, there was a Tesla dealership that came into a store. Now there is a Polestar dealership that's in a retail store that used to be Microsoft's store. The Polestar was developed by Volvo engineers and new company Polestar engineers, and it's a really very cool little electric vehicle. The Polestar 2 is. Soon Lucid, another high-end electric vehicle manufacturer, is coming into that mall, and put them in touch with a electric truck manufacturer, Rivian, and they're having discussions. That's not signed yet, to have Rivian, the electric truck and van manufacturer, come in and have a showroom there. So we can have a big all EV party in the Village Mall parking lot at some point relatively soon, when all of these folks get their stores lit up.
Thank you.
Great to hear. All right. Sounds like we have some consensus on the future of our transportation subcommittee. Thank you again, Michael, for taking lead on that. I think let's move on to our next subcommittee if everyone is okay with that. The next subcommittee is waste. So if a leader from that subcommittee would like to speak up.
I can speak to this one. Could we share the screen to the list of the actions?
I am not seeing, am I missing something?
It was on the main
actions, energy.
It was highlighted ones on the main list.
Priorities?
Yes, if you scroll down, we have ours highlighted.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the first one we agreed upon was adopt a zero waste resolution. That's one mentioned in the CAP. And that would definitely be something we would need to forward to town council. But one way to start would be find a model zero waste resolution to sort of adopt here. And then the next action item we thought would be a good one to get moving on would be to promote green business certifications with the Marin Green Business Program. And that could be something a little more grassroots with outreach. I don't know what resources we have access to at the town, but certainly maybe on the town website or newsletters. And then the next two action items are sort of related. Conduct a waste audit for residences and businesses, which is mentioned in the CAP, and then mandate recycling and composting for residents and businesses. That is also in the CAP. And those, I guess, are just general sort of assessing and managing our waste in the town. I think Sarah and Michael are also on this. So if you have any more notes, things to add.
I can put you in touch with Lorena Barrera in our office, who works with, coordinates with Zero Waste Marin for our education and outreach related to our contract with Mill Valley Refuse Services that does our garbage collection. I do know that I can't remember the number, but there was legislation passed that I think goes into effect next year, where it will require auditing of waste pickups to ensure compliance with green waste and composting and some things related to that. So that will need a lot of education and outreach for compliance with that. But in the meantime, I'll put you in touch with Lorena and she can fill you in on where they're at with that.
That would be great. Thank you.
When I'll just say, I agree that these are good priorities. The word mandate is pretty strong, and I don't know how that would be implemented.
Michael doesn't like that I told him how to recycle his garbage into the green can.
Well, it's already actually being implemented in some cases.
I know, except at Michael's house.
Well, at the town, we had
Hey,
a
I'm the
dumpster
biggest composter
behind town
around.
hall, and we didn't have a lock on it, and people would dump things in there that weren't cardboard recycling, and Mill Valley Refuse wouldn't pick it up. That's how they ensured compliance. They'd look in it, they went to dump it, they found non-compliant materials in the bin, and they left and told us to rectify the situation, and then they'd come back and pick it up. So that's how compliance works on the Mill Valley Refuse side. They will fine you eventually once the legislation goes into effect. But in the meantime, they don't pick up your bins.
Sorry, Rebecca, can I ask a quick question on that?
Yes?
When does that legislation go into effect?
I have to look that up. Hopefully I'll have an answer for you in a minute.
Okay, and then can I make a comment and a question? Thank you, Meredith, for sharing. I'm just curious as I look at these 4 actions, and I would, this is a question for you and for Rebecca, which of the 4 would be more community education related and which ones we would have to, Rebecca, run through council and the team there in the town? Like if we were going to promote out a list of, per what Sarah said, a list of 5 actions that the community would take, which one of these would fall into that?
Definitely, I guess, just education on recycling and composting, what goes in what bin. I suppose for green business, that's sort of a mix because not everyone owns a business in town or is part of a business in town, but I guess that would definitely also have to rely on some community outreach.
Okay, so the first 2. Thank you, Meredith.
Yeah. David Johnson, I know you've been waiting.
That's okay. Hey, Meredith and all, this kind of falls in a gap because it's a more good instead of a less bad thing, where I think this list, this spreadsheet tends to be reduction of harm and less bad rather than more good. There's a wonderful new initiative on food called zerofoodprint.org, and it's becoming pretty popular in California. It does address reduction of waste, but it also provides guidance and is a standard for elections and operations to increase sequestration of carbon through our food system. So sequestration has a hard time making it onto our list, but you may want to consider something like Zero Foodprint as a way to address not only reduction of waste, but increasing the sequestration in the food stream as we go.
I think that's an excellent point, and also, David, I think that's an important subtlety that a lot of these things are less bad, but encourage less bad, but are they promoting good? And I've been in, I mentioned at one of the conversations with the city manager and mayor, asked the question, this is going somewhere, give me a second, that what do we do with the street sweeping debris in town? And they were going to get back to me. They haven't, but I can follow up on that. Presumably it's being used, composting somewhere, somehow. I'm really interested in the Marin County Carbon Project, speaking of sequestration, and wonder if a something more than a less bad action might be to see if the things that we're picking up from our streets and leaves and everything, if that could be used in the way of the West Marin farmers to improve the carbon absorption in our parks and things like that. I'm just throwing this out, but I think David says something good. Instead of making most of these things are, let's make it less bad, but what can we do to this a new initiative? And I'd like to know more about the David, about the food program and how that relates to sequestration.
Michael, I know that in San Francisco and in most municipalities, if not all, the material that the street sweepers collect goes into landfill.
Well, I hope we're not doing that. That was my question for Public Works, and I'll follow up on that.
I can help get an answer for you as well. I also just wanted to point out, I went on Mill Valley Refuse's website, and the law that I was thinking of is the Mandatory Organics Recycling Law, AB 1826, and it pertains to businesses and multifamily housing at this point, and went into effect January 2020, requiring businesses and multifamily complexes that generate 2 or more cubic yards of solid waste per week must recycle organic waste. So that would help get you started on ways to help come up with initiatives that would encourage greater recycling of organic waste on the residential side.
Just to add, sometimes things aren't as straightforward as they seem, but just things like street sweepings are not necessarily clean material. They're going to be elevated in metals. They're going to be elevated in hydrocarbons, zinc in particular, which is particularly an issue right now, and runoff to surface water and toxicity to fish. So ideas like that are great, but they all come with these complications. And I think a lot of farmers and compost facilities might not take street sweepings because of the contamination that's in that kind of material.
Very good point. And I'd like to know more about what's in what we sweep up.
Everything that's in our cars, pretty much.
But certainly the contents of the green can should be going to composting, and therefore made eligible to help with the carbon sequestration program and carbon farming in West Marin and beyond. Go ahead.
But I think in terms of the waste committee, maybe what would make the most sense is keeping these actions in mind when, constructing what we want to do in the future, and the actions that we want to take, and then also looking further for the committee into what other actions that might be influential. And then I don't know if you had something else to say.
Definitely, I loved the idea of condensing our action items into, say, 5 or so things to just blast out to the town. And so maybe figuring out which of these would go into that list of maybe 5 actions to send the town would be something to work on.
Right. Great.
Meredith, can I ask if you'd want help from others?
That would be great.
Call a meeting and make it happen.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump on.
And just so everybody knows, I actually created another tab in this document of the actions that we're all discussing, and I'm just putting them in columns. So city council and then community education and awareness. So maybe for all the ones that are education and awareness based, we can all get together and figure that out.
Yeah.
But I just wanted everyone to know that I put it in there.
Thank you, Amy. That's very helpful. All right. I guess then our next group is water. Is that right? Was that group meeting? I know that Anne and Barbara are in there, and I don't know that they're still part of the.
I'm on that committee, and I'm not the chair, and I'm not in a position to be the chair. I hope to contribute, but we haven't had any meetings since the one in the beginning where these items were.
Looking at the list of members, I think this is, they all have left the committee, except for Ted. Ted is not officially left, but he is not comfortable meeting over Zoom.
He's not comfortable what?
Meeting over Zoom.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure this committee can survive. Maybe needs to be merged into something else. There are some good ideas there, but we don't have an active committee. Is that a new chairman?
He's scratching at my door the whole time.
He's elected.
Yes, exactly. It's Ollie. You're new chairman. Yeah. So, as far as the water committee goes, and maybe if anyone wants to take on looking at those actions, otherwise, I think we've got a great list right now. We can always revisit this, or if anyone feels very compelled to go through them, or organize a meeting or a call. Otherwise, maybe we want to stick with what we've already discussed and reevaluate over time. I don't know if there's anything on there that could be, added to a list of 5 actions.
I can take what you have down and just take it around to various departments that I know would cover things like this, like increased public water bottle filling stations. I know that the Parks and Recreation Commission had wanted to add more water stations around the various parks, so that may fit in nicely with their action plans.
I could say that the short-term items that the folks were most excited about when we met, and we were kind of focused on getting this committee to accomplish a few short-term things so that we could gain some momentum. But that was the water bottle filling stations. We know that people use them. They also serve an educational purpose. And we have them in a couple of places, like I think there's one at Piper Park, but there are many other places we could do it. It could even be encouraged at private businesses. It'd be nice if there was one at the entrance when you walk into town center or something like that. And then labeling of storm drains, we see that all over the Bay Area. I do, water quality work, and it's interesting that we don't have that in our drains here, and that's a very straightforward thing to do to educate.
And I can talk to Public Works about that. That's an easy one.
In a way that falls into the public outreach, but a big part of what we're trying to do here is communicate and educate the public. And we heard some comments earlier today about struggles just in communicating with the public, but things like this are what people see every day. And then I think the other one was a demonstration garden. And there was some thought, I think, that I had about could it be incorporated into the landscaping of the new town hall, where the landscaping actually was a demonstration garden with educational signage and labels and things like that. Could be put somewhere else, but if you just put it with a fence around it somewhere, no one's really going to go.
I think the fire department might have a demonstration garden, or maybe thinking about doing a demonstration garden about fire safe plantings too. So maybe between the various facilities, we could have a fire safe and low water native plant demonstration garden.
Could even be somehow incorporated into Menke Park, or along the path there. It's a well landscaped area, but it's not a low water demonstration garden necessarily. It doesn't have the educational aspect to it.
So you're thinking like tags that are near the plant that explain what each plant is if people wanted to purchase them? Or...
Yeah, you know, when you go to the county fair, they kind of do one the master gardeners kind of create
Right.
one
Under the tent at the
temporarily.
front.
And yeah, so something like that that's just maintained with educational signage.
I'll talk to Public Works about that.
Yeah, those were kind of the things we thought we could actually promote and get done without a big hurdle in front of us.
Good stuff, Ed.
Yeah, I like it.
Yes, these are the kinds of easy things that I can get the conversations started at the various departments and then report back.
Yeah, this is Dave Johnson. When you look at this list and you filter it through our focus and our mandate of carbon reduction or greenhouse gas reduction, when you filter it through that, are there 3 measures that you think would be most effective, even though they may not be the most easy or most visible? Did Ed go on mute?
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
I think it's a good question. I'm not sure the water actions are as easily directly related to the carbon reduction. You know, the water conservation is sort of a consequence of climate change. I have to think a little bit about
while you're thinking, you know, energy or water measures are mandated by the state pretty well, but if the community was to reduce its flow of its demand of fresh water and its flow of wastewater, it may be the way to reduce the energy demand, the water G of our system, and the carbon of our system. I would think that measures that are most effective at reducing flow will be most effective at reducing the carbon footprint.
That makes sense. In a similar vein, even though it's a very simple one, the water bottle filling stations, you know, reduce, reuse, recycle, reducing the use of plastic bottles is a carbon footprint improvement, both from the reduction of use and even recycling. I mean, I can tell you that recycling is an energy intensive and environmentally polluting process in and of itself. So right. Reduction is the first and best thing. So that first item on the list fits what you're talking about. And I tend to agree with you that other items that would reduce consumption have a domino effect in energy reduction as well.
Ed, can I ask about the building code? I don't work in that department, so I would need to do some research. But are there current impediments in the building code that either discourage or disallow rainwater catchment systems?
Yeah, we didn't know.
Okay. I can find out about that.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, we didn't know actually. So
I can tell you that the standard part of the building code, and Michael Harlock might be able to, or David Johnson, speak better than I, essentially says if you have a drain coming off of your roof, you got to direct that into the stormwater system and get it off of your property unless you have a particular retention basin, and almost everybody in their residential properties does not have retention basins. So the standard historical rule has been to put it into the storm system and have it go down to the bay rather than save to reuse in your own property. So gray water systems and rainwater catchment are relatively newer. They're not brand new by any means. The folks in the Middle East have been using them for thousands of years, but it's not entirely easy in the building code. Michael or David, would you agree with that?
Well, Michael, why don't you go?
There's definitely standard public works requirements for handling rooftop drainage, that are, a lot of it is picked up from the county of Marin, that are rote and have been that way, you know, as David Cunard explained, you know, you take the water and get it to the gutter as quickly as you can. And I think there have been there has been interest in gray water recycling, as David said, for years and years. And I think it's not necessarily encouraged through building and public works departments. That's a very general statement, but I mean, it's not like LA where they're using sewer water and recycling it for drinking in San Diego. I mean, there's some enormous potential technologies out there. That's all I have on it right now. I incidentally have to go to another call here, but we're really generating some good thoughts here. I especially here in the last part of the meeting. So,
sorry, Michael. I was just going to add, following up on David's comments, that about reducing consumption and the effect that can have is the idea of a demonstration garden, even though it's kind of a longer term educational thing. Certainly the transition to landscaping that is, you know, xeriscape or low water irrigation would be one of the items that's both easy to do over time and meets that kind of criteria that we were talking about.
All for it. I love it. I got to leave you guys. Thank you so much. I
have to leave as well. So I'm happy to catch up with Sarah and Martin later on what's next.
Great. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Michael. And then I think with that, since it is getting late, do we want to just think about, I think with these actions, we have a really good list, and going forward into our next meeting, we've addressed some things that need to happen with the meetings of the transportation committee and getting that figured out, and then just identifying some more ideas for waste and making that a little more clear. And then I think as far as the next meeting, we can look further into these actions and start developing a plan. Does anyone else want to add to that? Anything else people want to mention or think about?
Make sure the committees meet before your next meeting, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Crack the whip. Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy inaugural day, by the way, to everybody.
How about that poet this morning?
Oh,
did she steal the show?
She did. She did.
Let's invite her to our next meeting and she can kick it off with a poem.
Her name Amanda Graham, is that right? Just incredible, 22, and yeah, she's a graduate from your perspective, Sarah Meredith. she was phenomenal.
Yeah. Madam Chair, Dave Johnson here, and Amy especially. This idea about creating a priority list would be really good, and I know we need to wait for subcommittees to meet. I'd just like to propose for consideration that a few of us come together, review the work that has been done to date, and make recommendations to those subcommittees about what priorities might be that come out of their list to seed some thinking. And if that was a meeting that was to be scheduled, I'd be willing to participate, just to accelerate our motion a little bit. Mm-hmm. Not to excuse a subcommittee or to shortcut that, but to suggest that we do need to move along and they should benefit from some input from others about what in the light of this whole work, what some priority items might be.
Yeah.
Good idea.
It almost sounds like you want to establish a actions over subcommittee.
A, a
Which is-
kick the flywheel of this pottery machine
It's
committee.
totally fine. It just needs to be fewer than 7 people on that subcommittee, and then you're free to meet.
So I'll volunteer to participate in that if others see benefit in that, and if there's a way it can work.
I can go ahead and send out an introductory email for that. So I will go ahead and send it to you, David Johnson and Vice Mayor Kuhnhart, and then I guess I can forward it along to the group and see where interest lies, who might be interested in participating.
Great.
Right. Any other comments?
Thank you.
Thank you all. All right.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Good night.
So we
Bye-bye.
are adjourning at 7:07. Before
7:07.
recording, I did want to just have this on the record that I was distracted at the beginning of the meeting getting my laptop set up to work as the public comment timer, and I did not start the recording on time. So I just wanted to state for the record that the meeting was called to order at 5:34, and I missed the first speaker, but then I started the recording. So when you see the recording, it will be missing a few minutes at the beginning, unfortunately.
For those that are on the line still, I want to apologize that I was late. I got completely tied up in another matter, so I apologize.
No worries. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you, everybody.